Hello, my name is Candice Michelle, and I'm the creator and editor-in-chief and founder of Black Pinups. So, on today's podcast, my first podcast, I wanted to tell you why I created Black Pinups. So, I created Black Pinups. It's kind of a long answer, but I created Black Pinups because I didn't see anyone that looked like me out in California that was dressed vintage. Here's the long answer, so get ready. So, when I was a kid, I didn't realize it until recently, but when I was a kid, I grew up watching a lot of classics. My dad is very much into westerns, so I grew up watching Bonanza and all of those country western shows. My mom liked Little House on the Prairie, and I Love Lucy, and I also remember watching Dick Van Dyke Show and The Honeymooners and Mary Tyler Moore. And I would also hear oldies in the movies like Home Alone 2. You would hear all of those old Christmas songs, and I would hear like My Girl on the Little Debbie commercials. So I was always surrounded by classic movies, TV shows, old music, and but I was very much a modern girl. So I was very much into like TLC, Escape, DeBrad, the Spice Girls, all of that. But my mom used to take me to antique shows, or she would take me to antique stores. She would also take me to the museums. So I was always surrounded by history, and I really did like learning about history. But it wasn't until like around 1995 when one of my favorite singers in the whole entire world, Janet Jackson, she had this video out called 24 Play. And I thought that she was trying to be Marilyn Monroe because I saw her briefly, but I didn't know it was Marilyn Monroe. I didn't know who she was. And it was in a black and white video. And I remember liking that style. I thought she looked so incredibly beautiful. But I did not know was that she was portraying Dorothy Dandridge because there's this huge big deal. It was on Ebony, it was on Jet, I believe it was on Essence of who was going to play Dorothy Dandridge. And there was Vanessa Williams, Whitney Houston, and I think it was Jasmine Guy, and Janet Jackson all wanted the role in Halle Berry. So when Janet Jackson came out with 24 Play in 1995, that's what she was doing. She was hoping to be able to be portrayed as Dorothy Dandridge. We all know Halle Berry got the part. So I didn't know anything about Dorothy, and I didn't pay attention to her really, but I remember liking how the old school look of Janet Jackson from the 50s. So fast forward to, I would say 1999, no, let's make it 2000. Britney Spears, who's my favorite singer at the time, she made a video called Lucky. And I was like, oh, that's a cool style. She is a vintage movie star. And I was like, oh, that's a pretty cool look. I like her hair like that. And so that had me, someone that had said, one of her fans had said, oh, she's doing Marilyn Monroe. And so because of her, I actually went to the library, looked at Marilyn Monroe. I'm like, what's the big deal about Marilyn Monroe? And then I saw her movie, Some Like It Hot. That was the first movie I saw. And then I read one of her books. It was a picture book. And I was just so enamored with her. I thought she was so beautiful. And then I saw Carmen Jones, the movie that Dorothy Dandridge was nominated for an Oscar for Best Actress. And so I checked out that movie. And I loved it. And then I saw that Introducing Dorothy Dandridge would be on. So I watched that to get a more feel of who she was. And there was also Josephine Baker. So I watched the Josephine Baker movie that was played by Lynn Whitfield. And so that's how really I got into pinups. It was just so many series. It was just so much of of me getting into the classics. But there was this girl, her name was Audrey, and she said she was named after Audrey Hepburn. Again, I was into the old Hollywood movie stars, and I'm like, okay, whatever. But because of Marilyn, I got into Dorothy, and then it was Josephine Baker, and then it was Audrey Hepburn. And Gregory Peck, I heard of him because of To Kill a Mockingbird that we watched in middle school, and I saw that he did a movie with Audrey Hepburn. So I had moved back home from college, and then I heard about TCM, Turner Classic Movies, and then they showed Dorothy Dandridge in Bright Road, which I really loved. I thought it was such a sweet movie, and I just actually saw it a couple of weeks ago again. It was just a beautiful movie. And so I started to get more and more into the classics. And then J-Lo and Christina Aguilera, they all did their classic Hollywood looks. And then Katy Perry had came out. And so this look was becoming very popular, and also Mad Men had came out as well. So I remember thinking like, wow, there aren't a lot of black Hollywood stars that dress vintage just because they want to. Not like the way Katy Perry did, how she had an album. She had quite a couple of albums where she was just a vintage pinup girl. And Christina Aguilera also did the same thing. So I didn't see that. I only saw it with Beyonce and Jennifer Hudson because they were doing Dreamgirls, but they weren't dressing as vintage girls all the time. They just did it for the movie role. And I still don't see that. So I just thought, I was like, oh, that's interesting. But I had moved to North Hollywood when I had moved to North Hollywood for fashion design. I went to Art Institute of Hollywood. That was in the fall of 2010. And again, there was just very common to see a lot of Marilyn Monroe's and Audrey Hepburn's living there. And I was really getting into the vintage scene. I heard about rockabilly. And my friend Dave Ortiz of the Crown City Bombers, I went to his house and I saw that he was a rockabilly. And I was like, oh, you dress like this? And he was like, dress like what? I was like, oh, like this. I thought it was just a stage thing. It's like, no, I always dress like this. And our friend Brian Hogan, who is also a singer, he is the mix of Johnny Cash and Elvis Presley, and he always wears all black, and he always has a pompadour. He's very tall too. And so I was surprised to see him. The way he dressed on stage is how he dresses off stage, very rockabilly. And so I thought that was really cool, but I didn't think that was cool for black people to dress like that because I didn't see any. And I would go to Santa Monica and Ventura, see all these classic car festivals, the Johnny Cash Music Festival, and I was just really frustrated that I didn't see anyone that looked like me. I believe I was the only black girl at the Johnny Cash Festival. I saw maybe, I would say, let's just say 2% Latinos that were at that car show of Johnny Cash, and they were dressed that way. There was maybe 1% Asians that were dressed that way, but I didn't see anyone that was black that looked like that. So it was January 12th, 2012, where I decided to create Black Pinup Models, my Facebook page. And I created it. The first cover model was Madeline Sajai Jackson. I thought she was so stunning. Oh my gosh, is she a stunner. But the first black pinup model that was the modern black pinup model, a vintage modern, was Angelique Noir. And because of Angelique Noir, she knew Ashlita and she knew Jenny Rue, and they became my second and sixth cover models. And Angelique was the first one. And so that is really how Black Pinups was created, just from that very long answer. But that's how it was created. And then I created Black Pinups a year later, the magazine, to just show what we're all about, that we love classic cars. It has vintage recipes, short stories, poetry, pinup drawings, in between content, 8x10 pictures of beautiful pinups. Some of them dress like that just because they want to. Well, I'll just take that back. There's some that they just want to have their picture taken, so they dress up like that. But most of the girls that are in the magazine do live and dress vintage, which is awesome. So I have been keeping it up, and it's 7 years now that I've been doing Black Pinups, about to be the 8th year. And yeah, that's really why I created Black Pinup Models. I just didn't see anyone that looked like me, and I felt alone. And that's why representation matters. You want to see someone that is into what you're into, and that you don't feel like you're alone. There's so many different people that like so many different things, and that's really why I created Black Pinups, so I didn't feel alone. And I was very happy to see that there are a lot of girls out there that love Marilyn Monroe, Frank Sinatra, that live and dress vintage, and I think it's really cool. So that is my podcast. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you have a great one. Bye.